Hello everyone and welcome to today's Sutta class. We will start as usual with the Namo Tassa. Feel free to join if you like. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So, welcome to today's Sutta class. Today, we will continue the Sutta that we started reading 2 weeks ago, which was called Nutriment. This is in the Samyutta Nikaya, number 46.51. Yeah, 46.51. And this is a Sutta that talks about the 5 hindrances. And so this Sutta has 2 parts. Last time we did the first part, and the first part talks about how the hindrances are strengthened, how they are fed, how they're energized, how they're made bigger and stronger. And so how we are creating more and more delusions and obstacles in our mind, and how we are kind of basically continuously creating more problems for us and in our own mind. So this was about the patterns that we kind of unconsciously keep on strengthening, and how we keep on acting without really being mindful of what is happening. And that is why hindrances keep on growing in our mind. And so today we are reading the second part of the sutta, and this is the exact opposite, obviously, how we can interrupt this process, and how we can practice in such a way that we sort of start to weaken the hindrances a little bit, and then over time try to dissolve them and try to be completely free from them, and try to have a mind that is completely pure and calm. And obviously, in order to enter samadhi, to enter deep states of concentration or stillness, we need to dissolve all of the 5 hindrances. So basically, today we're talking about the concrete practical steps that we can take to work with those 5 hindrances and to eventually overcome them. So, as I mentioned last time, we already started talking about the 5 hindrances. Just to recap briefly, what are the 5 hindrances? And so the first hindrance is sensual desire. So that is the attraction towards an object, or towards a person, or towards any kind of maybe a view or any notion in your mind. So being attracted to any kind of thing. All that is sensual desire, attraction to an object. And then the second hindrance is the exact opposite of that. So the second hindrance is ill will. That is aversion towards an object, repulsion. So while sensual desire is kind of moving towards the object, attaching to the object, ill will is moving away from an object and sort of being repulsed. But in both cases, this is really unskillful. What we want to have is a mind that is free from aversion and attraction, that is in the middle, that is entirely balanced, and neither moving towards an object nor moving away from an object. So these are 2 hindrances, but they're basically just opposites of the same kind of mental behavior, being involved with an external object. So, and then the next 2 hindrances are sloth and torpor, also sometimes called laziness and sleepiness. And the 4th one is restlessness and remorse, also sometimes called agitation. So again, this is a pair of opposites. While laziness and sleepiness means that our mind is very slow, very sluggish, very dull. We don't have enough energy in the mind to properly practice meditation. Restlessness and anxiety and remorse and agitation means that we have way too much energy in the mind. The mind is all over the place. It keeps on moving around. And so again, we cannot focus on our meditation. And again, our goal is to come back into balance, to come back to the middle point between too much agitation and too much energy in the mind and too little energy in the mind, where we have laziness and sleepiness and so on. So again, we are trying to come to the middle point, to the middle path, which is, of course, the Buddhist path. And then the last hindrance is doubt. Doubt is just one, it's not a member of a pair. Doubt is just by itself. Doubt means not just any random kind of doubt that we can have about any kind of mundane thing, but this specifically refers to Dhamma practice, so doubt about the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. So for example, doubt if the Buddha really was enlightened, doubt if he really knew what he was talking about, doubt about the Dhamma, so whether there is an actual path that we can practice, whether this actually leads to enlightenment, or doubt whether the teachings have been properly preserved, so if we can actually still practice nowadays, or doubt in the Sangha, if there are people that actually get enlightened and that can teach us and that can guide us skillfully. Or it might be doubt in our own practice, in our own abilities. So people might think that other people can practice, but they themselves don't have the necessary good karma, or they don't have the skills, or they are just in some way incapable of practicing. So they're constantly undermining themselves, and because they don't believe in themselves, they're kind of creating obstacles, and so they don't commit fully to the practice, and therefore also don't make progress on the path. So that is the hindrance of doubt. So these are the 5 hindrances. Last time we talked about how we inadvertently keep on feeding into them and keep on making them stronger. And now we want to talk about how we can dissolve them. And so we will continue reading this sutta. I have put a link in the live chat. The link is to Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. And I'm also reading from Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. And if you click on the link, it should take you right to the place where we will continue today. So this has the heading called the denourishment of the hindrances. So denourishment means how we stop feeding them, how we withdraw energy from them to make them weaker and to eventually dissolve them. So, and the Buddha says the following. And what, bhikkhus, is the denourishment that prevents unarisen sensual desire from arising and arisen sensual desire from increasing and expanding? There is, bhikkhus, the sign of foulness. Frequently giving careful attention to it is the denourishment that prevents unarisen sensual desire from arising and arisen sensual desire from increasing and expanding. So we start with the first hindrance, which is sensual desire. And the Buddha says if we want to denourish this hindrance, so if we want to weaken and dissolve it, then what we have to do is we have to give careful attention to the sign of foulness. So what we usually do when we have sensual desire in our mind is that we only perceive the beautiful aspects of a certain object or a certain person, and we really are incapable, or we don't pay any attention, we're incapable of perceiving the negative aspects of that particular object or person. Let's say somebody has fallen in love with somebody else, so we think it's the most perfect person in the world, they don't have any kind of flaw, and we can't perceive all the weaknesses that that person has. Or let's say we love some kind of object, then we think this is the most perfect thing that was ever made, and we think, oh, everything is so beautiful about this object, and we don't see all the flaws that are there. This can be a hindrance, or actually any of the hindrances. They can, of course, spontaneously arise in our meditation. At some point, probably almost everybody experiences this hindrance from time to time. But there are also people out there who experience this hindrance a lot. Those people are kind of called the greed types. So those are people that experience this hindrance like over and over long periods of time. It's not just that it pops up from time to time in their meditation, but it's like the majority of their life is spent kind of running after sensual pleasures, and it's kind of focusing on all these beautiful aspects of sensual things. And for people who notice that this keeps on coming up in their life a lot, and who notice that they keep on indulging in all these sensual things, they really need to practice with this kind of practice very intensively. So let's say some people, they constantly want to have the newest shiny iPhone or the newest gadget and the most beautiful car, the fastest car, and they really want to have a very beautiful, good-looking partner, and they need to go on holiday to the most beautiful location, and they need to have an Instagram feed that is full of the most perfect pictures. And so they're really very attracted to sensual pleasures. So that kind of person might be a greed type, and that kind of person struggles a lot with this kind of hindrance. So for them, they need to do a lot of practice with this sign of foulness. And how do we actually practice with this sign of foulness? So in other suttas, not in this particular one, but in other suttas, the Buddha gives us a lot of methods for practicing with this. So what we need to train ourselves to do is that we need to train the mind to perceive all the flaws, to perceive all the drawbacks that are there in those objects, because our mind naturally only notices the beautiful parts. But now we specifically train our mind to be more balanced, to come back to that middle point between aversion and attraction. So because we naturally only perceive the beautiful things, we now also need to perceive the unattractive things in order to come to the middle. And the method that the Buddha kind of suggested was to work mainly with the body, with our own body, because of all the objects that are there in the world, the thing that we are most attracted to or that we are most attached to is our own body. So we also attach to our material possessions. We think that they are ours. And we are attached to, let's say, other people, our family members, our partner, for example. And again, we think that they are ours. But eventually, like to some degree, even if we haven't practiced that much, we still understand that these things are external and we might lose them eventually. So a material thing might break, or our partner might leave us. Of course, we don't wish for that, but we're kind of conscious of the possibility that that might happen. But for our own body, we really strongly attach to that, and we really think it's ours. So the object that we are most attached to is our own body. And for that reason, the Buddha suggests that we work with the body, because that really grabs kind of the sensual desire at its root, at its strongest point. So the Buddha suggested various methods in the suttas. For example, if you want to have a more detailed look, you can look at the Kayagata Sati Sutta. That is in the Majjhima Nikaya, number 119, I think. And there are many methods. One method is really to contemplate the nature of the body and to go through the body part by part. And it's called the 31 parts of the body, sometimes also called 32 parts of the body. And so we dissect the body into various parts. And for each and every single part, we consciously train ourselves to see that that is not that attractive, and that part also isn't mine, or it's not a personal thing. There's no I or no mine attached to that particular part. And usually it starts with the hair of the head. So there's a whole list, a list of, as I mentioned, 31 or 32 parts, and you can memorize that list or you can read that list. And for each and every part, you contemplate how that part is kind of not that attractive. So it starts with the hair of the head. Usually people are quite attached to their hair, or even the hair of their loved one, and they want to make it beautiful, and they spend a lot of time and money putting various products into their hair and going to the hairdresser and so on to make it look good. And if people have a bad hair day, then they are very kind of feeling very down, and it's kind of a big deal for them. But actually, when you reflect on the hair, you'll see it's actually just keratin fibers, and it's really not that attractive. It's really nothing special. It gets greasy and oily very easily. It can be very messy. You can have a bad hair day. it gets gray, it falls out. If it falls into your food, you think it's disgusting, or if someone else's hair has fallen into your food, you think that's really disgusting. So in that way, you can reflect about the hair of the head. Then you move on. The next item on the list is hair of the body. And again, sometimes people can be quite attracted to hair of the body. Not that much, I think, but sometimes people find it quite attractive if, like, let's say a man has a beard, for example. For women, body hair typically isn't all that attractive. So most women, I think, have no trouble seeing the disadvantages of body hair. You think it's not that attractive. You have to shave it off all the time. It's kind of annoying. So body hair is not that difficult to contemplate. And so you go through the list. The next item on the list is nails, fingernails. Again, we try to beautify them. We try to paint them, and we try to make them into nice shapes and so on. But again, it's just, I believe this is also keratin. It's just a random product of the body. It like gets dirty. And when you cut off your fingernails, and again, if they fall into your food or anything, then you think it's really, really disgusting. So in that way, you can reflect about all the various parts of the body and see all the drawbacks of those parts and see that none of those parts is actually yours. And you start with the outside of the body. The next items would be your teeth, your skin, and then you go inside. You go through all the organs in the body, and then you go through all the fluids in your body, your blood, pus, saliva, mucus, various other fluids in your body. And in that way, you really reflect and you try to break that attachment that you have to the body. Or other methods, if that method doesn't work that well for you, is death contemplations. There are also charnel ground contemplations. This is where you visualize your own body in various stages, like as a corpse in various stages of decay. From just recently dead to being bloated, to being eaten by worms and other animals, to turning into a skeleton, and then turning into dust and so on, all the various stages of decay. In that way, again, you see the body isn't yours, and it's going to kind of fall apart and become quite yucky, and eventually disintegrate entirely. So all these are contemplations that you can do to contemplate this unattractiveness of the body, or as it is called here, the sign of foulness, and hopefully over time kind of break this attraction to your body and also to other sensual objects. If you find that you're very attracted to a particular object, let's say your new iPhone or whatever, then you can actively also contemplate with that object and kind of reflect on all the drawbacks of that particular object. So that is how we work with sensual desire. And then the Buddha moves on to the next hindrance. And the next hindrance is, of course, ill will. And the Buddha says, "And what, bhikkhus, is the denourishment that prevents unarisen ill will from arising and arisen ill will from increasing and expanding? There is, bhikkhus, the liberation of mind through loving kindness. Frequently giving careful attention to it is the denourishment that prevents unarisen ill will from arising and arisen ill will from increasing and expanding." So here we have ill will. Ill will, of course, is the opposite hindrance to sensual desire. So when we have a lot of ill will, then we think external objects are really not that attractive. They're really quite repulsive. They're really quite annoying. Sometimes we also think they're quite fearful. So this has a whole range of emotions attached to it: anger, rage, fear, from mild irritation to like the wildest rage. Can be any kind of angry emotion, basically. And so again, this can be something that just occasionally pops up in our meditation. Then we have to skillfully deal with it. But also there are other types of people, those are the hate types, and they experience this emotion or this hindrance a lot, even in their daily life. So these are people that are usually perceived as quite negative people, constantly fault finding, constantly putting things down. Usually they are perfectionistic, And often those people themselves are also quite unhappy because they have very low self-esteem. They're also constantly finding fault with themselves. They're constantly putting themselves down, criticizing themselves, and feeling really bad about themselves also. So this is a type of person that we find quite widespread in our modern world, I think. So for such people whose character traits are more like this, or like when this is a constant character trait and not just something that pops up from time to time in meditation, then it's really important to work with this hindrance and to actively cultivate the remedies that will counteract this mental habit and eventually dissolve this mental habit. So these are people that are the exact opposite of the greed types that have a lot of sensual desire. So while the greed types see everything as very beautiful and all the objects as very attractive, the hate types find fault with everything. So let's say if they have a new iPhone, then they immediately notice all the flaws that are there with the iPhone. So they think it's too flimsy and it's easily breakable and it doesn't work properly and it was too expensive and the color is the wrong color and it's really not that beautiful, and they don't understand why there's such a hype about this phone. And eventually it wasn't worth the money and it's going to break anyway. So they're really kind of in a very negative mindset. So I think we all know quite a few people like this. Maybe you recognize yourself. Then what we need to do is we again need to cultivate the exact opposite in order to come to a middle point, to come into balance. And so because the hate types experience a lot of hate and a lot of ill will, what we need to cultivate is loving kindness practice. So loving kindness obviously is the opposite of hate. So by cultivating loving kindness, we will sort of balance out this hate and slowly kind of disintegrating this habit pattern and dissolving this habit pattern. And so it can be very challenging to do this practice. So for the greed types, it can be very challenging to practice the sign of foulness. For the hate types, it can be very challenging to practice the metta meditation or any of the Brahma Viharas actually. And that is because our habit patterns are just so strong, our hindrances are just so strong, our mind always wants to run in the opposite direction of what we need to practice. So when we start out practicing metta meditation, that can be very, very difficult, and it can be very challenging for people to actually get that feeling of metta or any of the Brahma Viharas. So usually for the hate types, they feel like it would be so much easier to practice the sign of foulness because it is so easy for the hate types to see all the drawbacks in your own body, for example. When they go through the 32 parts, they have no problem figuring out what are all the drawbacks of your hair and your skin and your nails and the rest of your body, because that's the habit of their mind anyway, finding all the fault. And for the greed types, for them, practicing the sign of foulness is very challenging. But for them, it would be so much easier to practice metta because they already think that everything is beautiful and nice. So feeling goodwill towards everybody is kind of much easier for the greed types. But that's exactly why both of those types need to practice the opposite and not what is easy for them, because that would balance out those hindrances that are prevalent in their mind. So how do we practice metta? Obviously, I think most people are familiar with metta practice or the other three Brahma Viharas. Just to mention the other three, there is karuna, which is compassion. There is mudita, or sympathetic joy. And there is upekkha, or equanimity. So compassion, we can practice if other beings are suffering. Then we wish for them to be free from suffering. Sympathetic joy, we can practice if other beings are experiencing good things. Then we can rejoice in the goodness or in the luck that they have. And we can just be happy that other beings are happy. And then equanimity is what we practice if if a situation is bad, but there's nothing we can do. And if we know that there's nothing we can do, then there's no point for us to create mental suffering and get too much involved in the situation. But in that case, we should practice letting go and being equanimous about the situation when we cannot change it. But all of these other three Brahma Viharas are based in the first one, which is metta. So metta is the foundation and the most important one, and also the one that we should start practicing first. So how do we practice metta? And metta can be practiced in various ways. I'm sure many of you have heard various methods. I think the most commonly taught method is to start practicing metta with metta words. So wishing for ourselves to be happy. May I be happy. May I be free from suffering. May I be at ease. May I be peaceful. Things like this. And in the beginning, it can be quite challenging because our mind is really not habituated to doing that, especially if you're a hate type. So it might feel like you're just repeating empty words and the feeling isn't quite there. So the important thing is to get that feeling going. But in the beginning, even just repeating the words can be quite helpful, just to set a new habit pattern in the mind. And over time, that will grow and strengthen and overpower that hindrance and dissolve that hindrance. So the most common method is to start with yourself. Once you have goodwill towards yourself, then go to people that are close to you, loved ones, then go to neutral people, then go to people that you don't like so much. So going from the easiest to the more challenging people. And so training your metta muscle and making the muscle strong with people who it is easy to feel metta for, loved ones. And then when your metta muscle is strong, then you can train with people who you don't like so much until you can have metta for everybody. Another method is, again, starting with oneself, then sending metta to people who are around you, let's say in the same building, then in the same city, in the same country, then in the whole world, then in the whole universe. And then we also include not only human beings, but all beings, including animals and the invisible beings. So this is another method. Other people who really have trouble with the metta phrases, like may I be happy or may so-and-so be happy, sometimes try to get that metta feeling going by focusing on something that they think is very cute. Because when we see something is cute, then it's easy for us to feel goodwill towards that thing. Could be a little baby. For many people, working with a little baby, imagining a little baby can be helpful to feel goodwill. Just to get acquainted with that feeling. And then when the feeling is there, then direct it to other people or other beings. Or if a baby doesn't work, then a puppy or a little kitten or a dolphin or something like this might work. Some people work with a teddy bear or a plushie or something, anything basically that makes that metta feeling going. So you can try different methods and see what works for you. So that is the hindrance of ill will, and this is how we work with that hindrance and try to overcome it. And then the Buddha keeps on going with the third hindrance, and he says, and what, bhikkhus, is the denourishment that prevents unarisen sloth and torpor from arising, and arisen sloth and torpor from increasing and expanding? There are, bhikkhus, the element of arousal, the element of endeavor, the element of exertion. Frequently giving careful attention to them is the denourishment that prevents unarisen sloth and torpor from arising, and arisen sloth and torpor from increasing and expanding. So this is the hindrance of laziness and sleepiness. This is a person, again, this might be something that comes up from time to time in meditation, or something that is a long-term kind of issue in your life that you really need to deal with. So this might be a person that is generally has very low energy, is always like half asleep, seems like a zombie or a sleepwalker, doesn't really get what's happening around them, always seems to be a little bit spaced out, seems to be not quite there. Or maybe if you just sit down in your practice and you just feel like really, really sleepy and your mind really doesn't want to focus on the meditation object, doesn't want to do anything, it just wants to fall asleep. And so there are two cases that we need to differentiate. The first one is like you're really genuinely physically tired because you've been just doing so much the whole day, you're just so exhausted, you're close to a burnout, you're just so stressed out, and then you try to meditate and you're just so tired. So if that is the case, then really what you should do is you should rest, and that might not be the best time for meditation. And if that happens over and over again, then maybe you should reconsider your lifestyle choices. You should maybe reflect if there's anything you can do to make your life less stressful, to make your life less exhausting, so that you do have the energy to actually do your Dhamma practice. And to generally live a much more peaceful, calm, and healthy life. But let's say your life isn't all that stressful and there isn't really an external cause of why you're so exhausted. It's just the mind seems to have this hindrance present all the time. So in that case, what you need to do is to bring up the energy in your body. As the Buddha here says, you need to arouse yourself, you need to exert yourself. So what is good in that case is to do a meditation practice that is a little bit more active. For many people, doing walking meditation in that case is quite helpful. Because walking meditation can kind of energize the body is moving. Especially in that case, you should do kind of fast walking. Don't walk too slowly because that will like make your mind even more tired or make your mind more sluggish. If you walk like faster, you bring your heart rate up a little bit, and because you walk fast, there are more sense impressions in your body and in your mind, so the mind has a more kind of more dominant or stronger object that it can focus on, because if you walk faster, the kind of sense data is just like stronger. It's much easier to focus on. And so if you've walked for like 10-15 minutes, your heart rate has gone up a bit, maybe you don't feel that tired anymore, then you can choose to sit down. Or if you really don't want to do walking meditation and you want to do sitting meditation, then again, it is good to have to energize the body and to have an object that is quite coarse, because then it's much easier for the mind to focus on. So what is usually good in that case is to do some strong breathing. So take very deep breaths, very intentional, very deep breaths, and breathe out quite forcefully, breathe in and out quite forcefully, because then you have a very, very strong object that the mind can focus on. And also all that oxygen that will go into your body kind of energizes you a little bit. So that can be very helpful. Just, arousing the body. Also, some people who struggle a lot with this hindrance, they do a little bit of physical exercise before they sit down for meditation. So they do 10 to 15 minutes of, let's say, a cardio workout, so that the heart rate has gone up, so that the body has woken up, and so that when you sit down, you don't feel that tired and lack of energy anymore. So that is the third hindrance, and then we move on to the fourth hindrance, and this one is restlessness and remorse. And the Buddha says, "And what, bhikkhus, is the denourishment that prevents an arisen restlessness and remorse from arising, and arisen restlessness and remorse from increasing and expanding? There is, bhikkhus, peacefulness of mind. Frequently giving careful attention to it is the denourishment that prevents unarisen restlessness and remorse from arising, and arisen restlessness and remorse from increasing and expanding." So now, restlessness is, of course, the exact opposite of sleepiness. Again, this means that you have way too much energy in the mind. The mind is all over the place. And again, this can be temporary, or this can be a character trait that is present throughout your life. So this can be people who are just all over the place, who have a million different plans, but can never put anything into practice, because the mind just jumps from one thing to the next, and they constantly get enthusiastic about the next thing, but they never see anything through. And they're very busy. They're constantly rushing around. They're trying to do a million things at the same time. And so their mind is very busy and just jumps around the whole time. And they're also not very grounded people. And so if you experience a lot of restlessness, again, one of the reasons can be that it's just your lifestyle is not very conducive to meditation practice. So you might have a very, very busy life. You might have way too much to do. You might be totally stressed out. And just as with the type that experiences a lot of laziness and sleepiness, for some people, they just experience a lot of restlessness. So either this kind of lifestyle can make you very tired and exhausted, or it can make you extremely restless. So if that is the case, if the restlessness is caused by you just doing a million things at the same time and you're just having way too much on your plate, then probably your meditation isn't going to take off, or it's not going to improve much unless you kind of try to have a lifestyle that is somewhat more calm and peaceful. And especially if you have this hindrance a lot, it's very good to pay attention what you put into your mind during the day. So not to give it too much input, not to listen to music the whole time, not to watch any like entertainment the whole time, not to be on social media too much, like so that you don't feed your mind more random input and make it even more restless and give it even more to deal with. But to actively restrain yourself, actively have a calm lifestyle so that that restlessness like slowly kind of has the opportunity to settle down. Because the like counterpoint to this restlessness is peacefulness of mind. So you need to have a reasonably peaceful lifestyle in order to kind of be able to develop that peace in your meditation also. Also, what we see, remorse comes under this hindrance. So remorse obviously arises when we have done something that we regret, that we shouldn't have done, especially usually this means we have harmed another person or another being. Either with our words, we maybe have said something that that really was way too harsh, or that maybe even was deceitful, or that has hurt another person, or we might even have caused physical harm to another being, an animal or a person, and then we regret that, and usually that means we have broken one of the 5 precepts. And again, we see why the 5 precepts are so important for meditation practice, because if we don't keep the precepts, then we have a lot of this hindrance of remorse. And that really prevents us from going deeper. And that shows why Sila is the foundation for Samadhi practice, and why the 5 precepts are so important as a foundational practice before we even try to go into deeper Samadhi or do deeper meditation. So the 5 precepts are really fundamental for this reason. Among others, obviously there are other reasons also. But let's say our lifestyle is fairly peaceful, but we still have a lot of restlessness in the mind. What can we do in the meditation practice to calm us down? So again, one good method, if we have really a lot of restlessness, is to do walking meditation. But in this case, we do very slow walking meditation. So we really pay attention to how we walk very, very slowly, very softly, how the foot touches the ground with the heel first, then it rolls over the ground, then the toes touch, then the next foot is set down, and so on. So really doing the whole process extremely slowly so that our overactive mind has the opportunity to sort of settle and calm down. And doing that through walking meditation is easier than through sitting meditation, because in walking meditation, we're still moving a bit. There's still a bit more going on. So our restless mind has it's easier to kind of dissipate that energy, that too much energy that is still in the mind, kind of through the whole body movement. If the restlessness isn't too bad, we can also do that, try to calm ourselves down in sitting meditation. For example, again, by focusing on the breathing, and this time breathing very softly, very gently, and trying to visualize. For example, we can visualize sort of breathing out all the restless energy and breathing in calm energy, breathing in calmness, breathing in peace. And just developing this perception of peacefulness in the mind can be very helpful. And usually the breath is something that grounds us, it's very easy for grounding, or very good for grounding, for bringing us back into the body and for kind of settling the mind into the body. So not to let it float around and think about a million different things. So this is the fourth hindrance, restlessness and remorse. And then we come to the last hindrance, which is doubt. And the Buddha says, "And what, bhikkhus, is the denourishment that prevents unarisen doubt from arising, and arisen doubt from increasing and expanding? There are, bhikkhus, wholesome and unwholesome states, blamable and blameless states, inferior and superior states, dark and bright states, with their counterparts. Frequently giving careful attention to them is the denourishment that prevents unarisen doubt from arising, and arisen doubt from increasing and expanding." So this last hindrance of doubt, again, this is doubt in our practice, our doubt in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, doubt that has to do with the practice path. And so usually doubt arises because we don't really properly understand how the practice works, how the path works, which is why a stream enterer has completely overcome doubt. So doubt is one hindrance or one fetter that is completely cut off at stream entry. And the reason for that is that a stream enterer has deeply, profoundly understood the Dhamma and seen the Dhamma. So a stream enterer is absolutely clear on how the path works and that the path is true, and they know how to practice to go all the way to arahantship. So they still have hindrances in the mind, but they exactly know how to practice. And for that reason, they never have any doubt anymore. And so what we need to do in order to overcome doubt is really trying to learn more about the Dhamma, really trying to deeply understand and contemplate how this path works, trying, for example, for some people that might mean reading suttas, listening to Dhamma talks, learning more. For some people, that might mean doing more investigation and contemplation in their Dhamma practice. And eventually, there are two pathways how we get to stream entry, how we overcome doubt. One is the intellectual path called the Dhamma follower, where we study and we learn about the principles of Dhamma and very deeply investigate the Dhamma and learn a lot about this. The other is what we call the faith follower. So this is a person who has very, very deep faith in the Buddha, and they are so convinced of the Buddha's enlightenment, and they get so much inspiration out of following the Buddha's teaching that this inspiration helps them to overcome the doubt. So they don't let doubt arise because they're just so convinced and they have so much inspiration in the Buddha as a person. So for such people, it can be very helpful to do a lot of chanting, because chanting leads to a lot of inspiration and a lot of joy coming up in the mind. They can do various practices such as giving offerings to the Buddha, giving offerings to the Sangha, and so on. And for both of these types, both the Dhamma follower and the faith follower, there are certain contemplations that we can do that help us overcoming doubt. Especially there's a group of teachings called the 6 recollections or 6 anusayas. 6 recollections, I'm not sure about the Pali word. And those 6 recollections are recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and then recollecting generosity, recollecting Sila, and recollecting the Devas or the heaven realms. So the way this is usually done is that we, especially for the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, the way this is usually done is that we reflect on the good qualities of these 3 items. So for the Buddha, we reflect on all the good qualities of the Buddha, the amazing virtues that he has, the amazing accomplishments that he has. Usually, traditionally, this is done with the Itipiso chanting. So the Itipiso chanting has 9 qualities of the Buddha. And And this is chanted every day in every monastery. So I think most of you will be familiar with it. If you're not familiar, it's also all over the suttas. So he is awakened. He is the teacher of the world. He is perfect in knowledge, perfect in conduct. So his wisdom is perfect, his sila is perfect, and so on. So there's a list of qualities, and we contemplate each and every one of them and get inspired, and also reflect, do I have this quality? And if I don't have it or don't have it enough, how can I kind of develop this more? And how does this lead to more peace? How does this lead to more happiness? And how does this help me making progress on the path? And the same for the Dhamma. There's this whole list of qualities for the Dhamma, again in the Itipiso chanting. And then for the Sangha, the same. So the Sangha is usually like mostly the people who have noble attainments, so from stream entry upwards, and all the amazing qualities that they have. So this is traditionally how it is done, to reflect on the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Of course, you don't have to do it that way. If there are other things that really inspire you about the Buddha or the Dhamma and the Sangha, you can reflect on those things that inspire you about this. And then you will see that this is really wholesome, this is really beneficial, and then your doubt in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha should subside. If you have doubt in your own practice, then the other 3 recollections might be very helpful. So the next recollection is recollecting generosity. And the next one is recollecting sila, virtue, and the devas, or the heaven realms. And so you reflect on all the good things that you have done, like how you've been generous, how you've supported others. You reflect on how you're keeping sila, how you're a really good person, and how that has helped you, how you have benefited in your life, all the positive outcomes that has brought you, all the problems that have been avoided because you didn't lie and you didn't steal and you didn't kill, for example, or you didn't harm another being. So just reflecting on that goodness, and then also reflecting that the heavenly beings, they have practiced in the same way, and so for that reason they were reborn in heaven. And also the practice that you are doing now, because you're being generous, because you're keeping sila, at the very least, if you don't get any higher attainment, that will lead you to a rebirth in heaven. So it will bring you a lot of joy and happiness in the future. As I mentioned, at the very least, because obviously we are not only practicing for a rebirth in heaven, we are practicing for development on the path, for the higher attainments, hopefully maybe for stream entry or for arahantship. So that is our real goal. But if on the way we get reborn in heaven, that might be a nice bonus as well. So these are reflections that we can do in order to overcome this doubt in our own practice, because we see we have already made so much progress and we have already had so many benefits from those preliminary practices that we have done. Oh, and by the way, the Pali word is anusatis, the 6 anusatis for the 6 recollections. So they're also found all over the suttas. If you want to read up on them, it's not difficult to find. So this is how we deal with the hindrance of doubt. And so this is also the end of the sutta that we want to read for today. So I hope now you have a much clearer idea how you can work with these specific hindrances that you might struggle with. Or as I mentioned, sometimes in a meditation practice, a hindrance can pop up that doesn't come up all that often. Maybe something that is not the dominant hindrance in your character, but you should still be able to sort of work with all of the hindrances in some kind of way. So whichever because we all experience most of the hindrances from time to time at least. So it's good to have an overview over the various different practices that you can do, so that you know when this particular hindrance arises, then this is a skillful way to deal with it. So hopefully this was helpful. And now we still have some time for some questions, if there are any. So please put them in the live chat and I will see if I can answer them. So let's see. Okay, so Dan says he can relate. Thank you. He says, thank you. It's so great to hear the Dhamma through people who I can relate to, but I'm glad that this is helpful. And Dan also says, one of my friends who is into music after meditation said it's like flies going for the light. I wonder what you think of this reference to uncareful attention to the sign of the beautiful. Yeah, it's kind of counterproductive if you want to listen to music right after a meditation, because hopefully if you have meditated, you've just attained, or at least made an effort to attain some kind of peace of mind. And if you listen to music afterwards, you're just agitating the mind again, and you're actively destroying the peace that you've worked so hard for, like, to get just now. So basically, you're destroying all the effort you made in your meditation. So it's not very recommended. So yeah, it definitely seems like uncareful attention to the sign of the beautiful. It's also a sign that the mind is quite restless, because if you have a very peaceful meditation, you come out of meditation, then you just want to kind of bask in that peace and preserve that peace as much as possible. If you have to run to the next distraction and listen to music straight away, it just shows that your mind is still quite restless. So this might be the hindrance of a sensual desire, but it might also be the hindrance of restlessness. So let's see. Here's another question from Sud. And I ask, in terms of metta, can you give advice as to how one can practice metta while also keeping the 5 upadana khandha in mind? Do we show kindness while keeping in mind that beings such as ourselves are deluded, hence need kindness and compassion and generosity, given that deludedly we hold on to these khandhas so strongly and suffer? Or is this a wrong way to practice metta? So I think this question relates to, like, some people have trouble practice metta, or they have some kind of resistance to practicing metta because they think, yeah, well, if I say, may I be happy, or may so-and-so be happy, it seems that I believe that there is a stable I or self there, and I don't really practice with the 5 khandhas as like impersonal entities or impersonal processes. So it seems that I'm not really practicing the teaching of non-self while I'm doing metta practice. So for beginners, it is usually best not to think too much about the 5 khandhas while doing metta practice, because it's better to just focus on one thing, and that is on creating that goodwill in the heart. So if at the same time you try to contemplate impermanence and contemplate non-self and the 5 khandhas and so on, your mind is very distracted and it's very difficult to create that feeling. So it's better to just focus on one thing, and to just, when you do metta practice, just do metta practice. And that at some other time, you can do contemplations about impermanence and non-self and 5 khandhas and so on. So just have 2 separate periods during your meditation, or 2 entirely separate meditation periods during the day, and do 2 different techniques, like clearly separated and not too much at the same time. Because otherwise it's just a big mess and you don't really make progress in anything. Like, you don't make progress in metta, and you also don't make progress in your contemplations. Eventually, of course, if you get really, really good at metta, what happens is that your heart opens and all the distinctions between yourself and others dissolve, and you just have a huge, like a wide open heart, and just radiate metta through the entire universe, basically. And at that point, you have basically dissolved this notion of an I or a stable self, or this notion of there being distinct other beings, and there being a separation between yourself and others. So at that point, you have basically overcome this attachment to self through the metta practice. But again, this is a fairly advanced stage. This probably usually doesn't happen in the beginning, but you can get there also through metta practice. And Patricia says, is doubt ever helpful? Could Ayya please share some words on this? So doubt again, this doubt here specifically is doubt about the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, or doubt in your own practice. Doubt about the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha is never really helpful. This is always just a hindrance. Because the Dhamma path is the supreme path, and because the Buddha is fully enlightened, and the noble Sangha has noble attainments, doubting them really isn't useful at all. Of course, in daily life, doubt can sometimes be helpful if you doubt whether or not, like if your milk has gone off and you doubt whether or not you should still drink it, then of course that will be helpful because you don't get sick if you don't drink it. But doubt in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, it really isn't helpful. Doubt in your own practice is only helpful if you practice wrongly, because then you sort of question whether you're doing the right thing, and then you have the opportunity to change. But if your practice is generally going well, then sort of undermining that by constantly doubting and second guessing yourself sort of isn't helpful, because then you can't make a full commitment to your practice, because there's always this nagging voice in the back that says, oh, maybe this is wrong. So you kind of sort of blocking your own progress if you have doubt in that. But if your practice really doesn't make any progress, then of course doubting whether or not you're practicing the right way is a good idea, because clearly you're not practicing the right way if there's no progress whatsoever. Okay, it seems that this was the last question. Buddha Ruchi says, thank you for such a practical study of Dharma. I'm glad that this was helpful. And again, I think we all struggle with most of those hindrances from time to time. So it is really good for everybody to kind of be familiar with the remedies, also for hindrances that don't come up that often, so that when they come up, you know what to do. And most of these sort of ways to deal with them are quite practical. They're not that difficult to do. Most of them just need training, and they need persistence, and we shouldn't get discouraged if we don't get it right the first time, or if the hindrance sort of pops up again the next day, because many of them sort of need to be practiced for a long time, because like we have cultivated those hindrances for a long time, for our whole life, or maybe even for like many past lives. So we can't expect like results overnight. So we also need to cultivate those remedies over like a significant amount of time in order for them to be effective. So don't be discouraged and keep on practicing. And Patricia says, can I talk more about how to identify the types? So we have talked about the types a little bit in previous videos, but generally, well, get to know yourself more. If you're not sure, then talk to a teacher or talk to the people around you. Usually people around you can tell you quite easily if you're the type who is very greedy and who constantly sees everything like much more rosy than they actually are, then you're a greed type. Or if you're a really negative fault-finding type, then you might be the hate type. Or if you're completely spaced out and not really awake, then you are kind of the lazy, sleepy type. Or if you're completely up in the air, having a million different ideas and constantly trying to do too many things, then you're the restless type. So people around, if you really don't know yourself, people around you can usually tell you quite easily. So, and then we have one more question from Venerable Sumita. Venerable Sumita, it is nice to see you, and thank you for joining in. Your question is, please explain how will our future generation move forward? So that is a really big question. And it is also not that much related to the 5 hindrances, which we're talking about today. And also it's the time is already up. So I'm going to leave that question for another talk because it's already 3 o'clock. And these kind of questions are also very suitable to ask during monk chat, which I believe the monastics at Empty Cloud usually hold on Fridays. So that might be a good opportunity to ask that question. So I'm sorry that I cannot talk about it today because the time is up. So for now, we can finish the talk with 3 sadhus. Feel free to join if you like. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And I wish you all a good day and a good week. And I will see you all next Tuesday.